And we're live.
And we are live.
Hey, everybody. Greetings from Winnipeg, Canada.
And from Atlanta, Georgia.
Thanks so much for coming to our little party tonight here in Cyberland. Of course, we got tech trouble right off the hop, so hopefully that's out of the way. So bear with us if there's any glitches.
Well, yeah, welcome to everybody that's here. I see a lot of familiar faces and a lot of names that I recognize, and then some I don't. It's so exciting to have everybody here gathered to celebrate our book launch, both of our book launches. So I think, Dodie, you can take it away. Start first.
Yeah, well, we actually made a schedule for this because we're just management types, I guess, in this party. I'm just blown away. I'm seeing folks from Australia. I'm seeing folks from across Canada, across the United States. That's amazing. Thanks. It's been a long haul to get this book off the ground, and I'm just like so excited. There it is in my hands. I can't even believe it. There's just so much to be completely excited about. Wow. Rose from Churchill just popped in. This is the most international shindig I've been to in a long time. So Earth Magic, it's here. I'm really excited about it. There's some fantastic contributions in this book, some great essays from other practitioners. Part of my fiendish conspiracy is to infiltrate Llewellyn with as many Canadians as possible, and there's a lot of really fine Canadian voices and one British voice in here too. It takes a whole community to build a book these days, and I'm really glad that everybody's here. But I'm talking too much. Heather, show your cover. You got your books. They came. There was a lot of shipping delays that we were both kind of tense about.
Yeah. So here is mine. It's shiny, so I'm getting a little bit of a you can see through it. It's like a mirror at this point. There you are, Dodie, in my book cover. So this is really exciting. It's packed full of movie trivia, movie information, witchcraft history in the U.S. It's a social history. It's a movie history. It's a witchcraft in America history, just all in this one book. And it's really great for this time of year because I know a lot of you out there watching witch movies right now and horror movies. So this is a great companion. So you can watch a movie and then look up some really great facts about it and how it lands within the greater scope of witch film history. So I'm so excited. And like Dodie said, it was a long time coming, a lot of work, lots of fantastic information. So I think with that said, we can get started. I think we probably need to just say a little bit about who we are for those people who don't know. I think most of the people on here probably do, because I see a lot of familiar faces. But just a quick background, and then Dodie can introduce herself a little bit. But I am a film historian, witchcraft scholar. I am a journalist, editor, author, and I've spent 30 years in the occult esoteric world doing different things. I'm a member of Coven the Goddess, a member of Religion News Writers Association and Circle Sanctuary. So I've been doing a lot of stuff in and around this world. This book is a long time coming. I've been thinking about it, studying films for the same 30 years or more. I love old movies. I love movies. And I did work in the industry for a while as well. So it sort of brings together all my interests. So that's who I am. Dodie?
Who am I? Like Heather, I really like films. My day job is in documentary film production, which, is an industry that's taking a bit of a beating, which is, you got to make lemonade out of lemons, right? So it's giving me more time to write. Earth Magic is my first book. But I've done other types of writing before writing a book. I was a writer for The Wild Hunt for a few years as the Canadian correspondent. And I do all kinds of creative stuff. I make things, I cook things, I garden things. I'm active in my local pagan community here in Winnipeg. I am part of a coven. I'm a initiated type witch, a Wiccan, even though, that might not be as fashionable as it was, back in the olden days. But here we are. And I'm so excited that I actually have a physical copy of my book in my hand. I can't even believe it. And, there's one thing that a third entity in this party that I need to introduce, and that is the decorative gourds. Can we see there are gourds in the house? Heather, where are your gourds? We promised these people decorative gourds. It's a party.
Okay, hold on. Right here, I'm going to point. There's one. It's like, find the gourds here. You got one over here, and then hold on. Decorative gourds. We got them. We got some gourds right here. Oh, yeah. See, I've got some over here. I can't see because of my chair, but there's a whole bunch. Look at that. So we promised you gourds. We've got our decorative shellac gourds here, all of that. So that's here too.
Okay, that was really important that we throw that in because it is a party after all. So, Heather, I've got some, Heather and I decided to do this like really casual. We're going to interview each other so you guys can learn a little bit more and the conversation will be fun. So Heather, I get it. You like the witchcraft and you love films, but what made you decide to write this book about these things?
Okay, so basically, as the story goes, and there's always a story with me, is that back in the 90s in grad school, when I was in film grad school, I noticed that there were a lot of witch films coming out. This was after The Craft, a few years after The Craft, and there was a series of just witch stuff going on in the world, in the film world. And I said, there's something to this. And so I had thought about actually going on and doing this as a dissertation, because I thought there's something more to this than meets the eye. But I decided not to go on, and so I wound up not doing my dissertation and went into writing and a number of other things. And so life got away, as they say. And then around I would say 2012, 2011. When I really started doing pagan media stuff, and then of course, again, writing for The Wild Hunt, where I started doing more critical work of film and media and fiction films, I started noting there was an uptick in films again. And I said, okay, you know what? I think it's time to do the study. So I started watching very carefully and then decided it was time to do the book. And it was just something I noticed from my film experience and the work that I did in grad school and undergraduate school. I noticed I love to study film and how it relates to culture and how it relates to society and how it changes. And so I noticed this going forward with witch films. I said, there's something here and I want to do this. And that's what launched the study in the 2013 or so, 14. And then it just became the book. A lot of movie watching.
So this study then, why is it so important, and what does it teach us?
So for us, let's see, for generally speaking, as I said, it's a social history. So you do see a good look at the U.S., because this is American based, okay? It's U.S. based. And so you get a look at the 20th century history, particularly because it's most of it, but you get a really good look at history. You get a good look at film history and how those two come together. And then interwoven in that, why it's important specifically in terms of witchcraft and witches, is how is witchcraft represented over time? Why is it different in the 1910s from the 1990s, from today? And what that proves, and really I did this study trying to answer that question. Why is it changing? Why is it important? And what you see is that the actual story of the American cinematic witch, and I include television in that, is actually the story of the American woman. It parallels gender agency, the changes in gender politics, and how women are treated. Because in the end, although there are male witches, although there are witches that are, we have now trans witches, for example. But for the most part, witchcraft has been an allegory for women's power, or a weapon used against women, and it still is to some degree. But in film, that you can see that and how that work plays out, and that's what this story becomes, is the story of the American woman in many ways, and it also is the story of how America, or the U.S., views witchcraft, which is a secondary story too. How did it view magic and witchcraft? And that's a secondary story in relationship to the modern witchcraft community.
About your book, Heather, and I just want to throw this comment in, is that there's like a million books of how to witchcraft that you can buy. And what I think is really important to note about what you've done is you've created a new type of document that it lends richness and depth and texture to the culture of the modern pagan movement. And I think that's really cool. So, it's, people always say, where are the more advanced witchcraft books? And, culturally, that's exactly what your book is. So I find that really cool. And I just wanted to, pat you on the back for that. And so however you're supposed to do that in cyberspace. But I just got to know, is there any real magic in witchcraft movies?
So, well, just to your point, is that's actually true, because you when this study gives the person who practices witchcraft a context of how they relate to their representation, the representation of witches on film, which is really vital to living modern witches. How are we represented here? How are we represented here, and why? So it definitely lends context to a modern witch's place in society over time. So there's a lot of pieces to this. But so the question, is there any real magic? I actually do a presentation on this, and it's really fun. Yes, there is. And this is why me writing this book was different than someone who just studies witchcraft, through academia or whatever, is because I can watch a movie and go, oh, wait a minute, that's something that was in a book. Wait a minute, I think that's done in circle regularly. So you can hear the phrases. So yes, there is real witchcraft. It didn't really start, there was a little bit in the early 1910s, just a tad. But it really didn't start to pick up until the 1970s in horror films. These are not representations of witches. Good representations. These are horror witches. These are satanic witches. These are evil witches. But you hear words coming from Raymond Buckman's books, from Paul Hewson's books. You hear the actual words coming from Gardner. You actually get the fivefold kiss, for example. So you see this word, blessed be, so mote it be. This language is woven in the 1970s, a little bit in the 80s, a lot more in the 90s, and then more and more as time goes on. And as film producers and filmmakers bring on real witches to help them. Now, very few of these representations are accurate, but they're pulling from real witchcraft. So yes, there is smidgens, just a little bit here and there, within the fictional representations.
Well, that's fun, because when you do see that on screen, and you hear those words that are so familiar to you being said, by an actor on it gives you goosebumps. It kind of validates that we've actually made it into the mainstream culture, that there is a place where, we can be, sometimes not so greatly represented, but sometimes very greatly represented. Very cool.
And that's very true. And in the 90s, you heard a lot about that. You had a lot of films and television shows trying to make that distinction. You're trying to say, and it was getting back to you saying about Wicca is not so cool anymore as it once was. That's true in a way, but it's in the 90s. That was the way they distinguished. That was the way they distinguished bad witchcraft from good witchcraft. In the late 1990s, they were using Wicca as the term. And so that's what made it became very cool. And so the movies actually were inspiring people to look into witchcraft, look into Wicca specifically, without using the word witchcraft, and find their way. And so, yeah, and I still think Wicca's cool, by the way. So I'm just saying. But so I'm going to turn that off for a second. I'm going to ask you a few questions, if that's okay with you. Do you mind if?
Oh, I've lost your audio, Heather. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me right now?
Yeah, I got you back. Yeah.
Okay, so do you mind if I ask you some questions about real magic right now?
Earth magic. My favorite kind of real magic.
Just so everyone knows, I'm having to switch back and forth with some muting because we're having a feedback problem. So if one of us goes funny mute, it's just because I'm playing with the muting so that we don't have as much feedback. So just be patient with us on that. That was part of our tech problem. So we're gonna switch to some real magic and talk about earth magic. And before I ask you a question, I'm just gonna preface that this book is something that was a project that came about, and there are 4 of them, and it started with water, and then it went to let's see, what was the second one that came out with? Air, and then fire. And I believe the person who wrote the fire book may be in our midst. I think I might have seen her name pop up. So in each one had a different author. So this one is the final one, and Dodie came aboard, and I was so excited to have her come aboard. So the first question I have for her is, Dodie, why, when I came to you and said, hey, I got this project, and you had to think about it, what made you want to actually join this crazy project, this crazy idea we all had? What made you attracted to it and inspired to?
Oh, and I lost the last half of what you said, but I'll just pretend I know what you said. Well, Heather, when you first mentioned this project to me, and I told this story to somebody earlier today, and I was laughing so hard because it's such a funny memory. You sent me an email, and I was in production working on a film. I get this email, it's from you, so I open it, and it was kind of like, hey, got this thing. You want to do this? Want to write a book? Oh, by the way, how's this other thing going in your life or whatever? And I thought you were joking, right? Wow. And I was driving home later that afternoon when it hit me. Heather's not joking. Why would she joke about that? So I had to pull over and reread the email and go, no, I really want to do this. This is very cool. Because this is an opportunity to be my deepest, most stubborn Taurian self and write about all the things and all the aspects of magic that are really, really personal to me and that I really, really deeply care about. It was a chance to talk about environmental things. It was about a chance to talk about cultural appropriation, because that land rights and cultural appropriation completely fall under this umbrella. It was a chance for me to also confront some things I had some problems with, in the book, and every book in the series has a chapter about crystals and gems that are associated with that element. And that's always been a really hard topic for me. I care deeply about the earth, and I get really prickly when it comes to issues that like mining and stripping natural resources. So I really needed to sit with that and to hash it out with people who work in that industry, and get my head around how can this be part of magic, this, pagan, cuddly, earth-friendly thing that we're all in love with, and still have topics and areas that seem incongruent with the current. So it was a pretty deep thing for me, a big deep dive, and it's been really cool watching the other books be released and be able to read them and to discover as we were going along that, these 3 other incredibly powerful priestesses were on the same sort of journey as me. It was very cool. Very cool.
That's awesome. Yes, and let's just say that the other books were Water was written by Lilith Dorsey, and Air was then done by Estrella Taylor, and then Fire was done by Josephine Winter. So, and what's really cool is it was an international group of writers too, which was really nice. So, so now I want to get into sort of, you did earth magic. So I want to know, what does that mean? I mean, you touched on a little bit on the crystals and stuff, and what you had to sit with. What exactly, everything's earth, but what is earth magic? How did you define it, and how did you come up with the the specific teachings that you had in there?
Well, I think of earth magic as things that you do as a magical practitioner that make manifest something in the world. If you're giving something form, if you're giving something foundation, if you're giving something a body, that's earth magic to me. So, in the book, I talk about evocation and invocation, and the idea of giving a body to a disembodied spirit entity, be it a god or some kind of spiritual energy. To me, that is definitely earth magic. I'm giving physical form to something. Sometimes when you make stuff, you're doing earth magic, because you're taking something and you're making it. You're giving it a shape. You're giving it a container. You're giving it a space. I touch on kitchen witchery in one chapter of the book. Kitchen witchery was one of those other things I really had to sit with for a while. I guess I saw too many Pinterest boards where it's like, look, I cooked dinner for my family, I'm a witch. It's like, there's a line there. And how are you doing that work in the kitchen? How are you using those resources? What kind of intent are you putting in the thing that you're making? And I actually wound up having a hell of a lot of fun with that chapter. That's great. I talk a lot about working outside, working in the garden, and being aware of the natural cycles of the planet Earth. Like you said, Heather, like everything is Earth. We're earthbound beings. Trying to find the places to draw the line. It did become a little tricky sometimes, because it could be everything or it could be nothing. But tried to make as many tangible decisions in that as possible. So, does that?
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And I think one of the things I'd like you to touch on, which just briefly, because you mentioned it already, is that your attention, you're very careful. And one of the things that struck me actually reading the book is your very careful attention to understanding spirit of place, particularly in the land that you are, and how not only you talk about how you have to be respectful to the actual spirits, the land, the plants, the trees, and you really give a really nice, beautiful way you handle that. But there was more to it than that. And you know what I'm talking about. The people that lived there before, the people that have lived there on this land. And I'd just like you to speak to that just briefly, because I think that's a major tone in the book, of really forceful part, an inspiring part. So I'd like you to just mention that real quick.
I live on Treaty 1 territory, Winnipeg, Canada. It's the homeland of the Métis Nation. And, I'm acutely aware of that. It's in Canada, and I'm sure all the Canadians that I see popping up here on the board can relate to the intense political climate that we're living under. We're living in a period where settlers and, those of us who are not, of this land are coming to terms with our colonial past. And it's ugly and it's hard to face, and we need to do it. We just need to do it. We have to make things right. And there's if you want to be a magical practitioner and you want to get groovy and get in tune with the spirits of the land, in some places those spirits, there's a lot of local stories that the elders will tell you around here where I'm from. That those spirits, they can't necessarily see us. The some land spirits in some indigenous cultures can't recognize people who don't carry the blood memory of the people that are indigenous to the land. And that's something that, maybe a lot of our sort of contemporary paganisms are going to have a hard time facing, is that, just because we're here and our intentions are good doesn't mean we're entitled to anything, that, what can we do to start building those bridges, those ancestral spirits that live on the land in so many, countries around the world. I mean, it's not just Canada, but a lot of the indigenous spirits have had thousands of years of relationships with the indigenous peoples. And if those spirits are seeing us treat those people unfairly, why would those spirits want to have relationships with us? Right? It doesn't make sense. It's just not logical. So, the first thing we need to do if we want to start building those bridges and creating those constructive magical relationships is start being better people in the world and treating other people with respect and consideration, and giving people a chance, to get their land back, to have their treaty rights met, and to be the force of that change and be aware of it. Treat the human beings that you can see with respect, and the land spirits, the little people of the land, they'll recognize that we're doing that, and then we can maybe start working on those relationships too.
That was beautifully said. And I think that comes across in your book. And I know you have some essays on that as well that are very important. So another part of earth magic. So I would like you that was a really great answer. And so, a lot of people are, I think, turning to earth magic, turning to witchcraft at this point in time. It seems like, I noticed in my own book, and this is why there's so many movies now, because people are turning to these magical ways. Why do you think that is? Is it a connection to the earth? Is it something else? I'd like you to why do you think that this is becoming a major force, whether it's Wicca or some kind of folk magic? What do you think is going on?
Well, this is where our two books tie in together. Like in the 80s and 90s, we had movies and pop culture really driving people into being interested in magic, right? I started out in the 80s, and it was, books were the gateway drug. Everybody had that little metaphysical section in their local bookstore, and they looked for the little crescent moon on the spine, and that was an indication that you could get that book and it would talk about something witchy. And in the 90s, we had a huge explosion of media. We had, all those films, The Craft, and, TV shows like Buffy, and everybody was jumping on the bandwagon and getting involved. And that will never cease, even when the types of witches that are being portrayed in media aren't necessarily positive or like, happy, good witches. People are still drawn to the sexiness. So that baseline interest is always going to have people coming to our door. That being said, in the last 18 to 20 months, pandemic times, I know the group that I facilitate has seen an explosion of interest in witchcraft, and groups that I'm a part of are blowing up with new members, and in a time of crisis, people are really looking for a connection to something tangible, something foundational that they can hold on to. People want some control over this uncontrollable situation that we're in. And, touching the earth and being connected to at least the ground, that, what we see outside and the ground under our feet is so vitally important right now. And I really see it. And people want to understand how the world can be healed and can be better. And we can get our health back, and we can, get our climate crisis under control. Everybody is starting to slowly, globally, everybody's starting to kind of slowly turn around and go, wow, Gaia is really in trouble, folks. And a lot of folks are turning to magic as a way of regaining some of that control and having an intimate connection with something that's real that they can touch. You know, it's all around us. I mean, there was a period of time last winter when I was getting email and Facebook direct messages from people on a like almost daily basis wanting to connect, with magic as a spiritual path to help them and heal them in a time of global crisis. So it's a big deal.
Yeah, and that's reflecting. You're absolutely right, and that's reflecting in the number of films and the number of TV shows we have centered around magic, even beyond the witchcraft films. But and the popular ones, and what I've seen in that the change over the last 5 to 8 years is that a lot of people out there are not just turning to the regular forms of witchcraft. They're not only even doing just eclectic witchcraft. What they're going to is folk magic, a lot of folk magic, a lot of looking back at their whether it's their family roots or some kind of other type of folk magic, which always seems to be very grounded in nature, in what's around us, and looking back at history and looking back at these magics and these forms that are very very grounded in, again, folk practice, everyday practice, people, kitchen witchery, all this kind of stuff. All of these things seem to be going on, and just to relate back to my book is that that's being reflected in the representation of witchcraft. There's a far greater amount of diversity, not only of practice, but also of the way witches look in films now compared to the 1930s, compared to even the 1970s. And so you're seeing that diversity that's happening in the practice of magic and witchcraft in real life reflected in the films and TV shows we see today on screen. So that's a really nice piece. That's a really nice parallel to draw. So I'm going to turn it over to you for a second, but we may want to turn to some questions.
Been some really lively chatter going on in the chat bar, and it's so cool to see so many. I see Kaylee is down in Australia, or up in Australia, I guess, depending on which way you're looking. And there's a Canadian living on another Indigenous territory, so it's fun. It's fun to see everybody piling in. I just want to touch on something you said briefly, Heather, about people wanting to connect with those sort of folkloric magics. Anything like that. People wanting to get reconnected with their families, their family histories, their ancestors. People wanting. I don't know about what it was like in Atlanta for you, Heather, but up here, everybody started planting gardens last year. Everybody's running around trying to figure out how to plant a garden, trying to relearn these things that used to sustain our grandparents' generation in a very firsthand way. People are trying to reclaim that. You could not buy a canning jar to save your life at Canadian Tire. Everything was sold out, because everybody was getting back to those very hands-on, grassroots, let's just sustain ourselves kind of things. And magic was right in there with all of that, Need to know how to feed my family, need to reconnect to my family, and I need to do magic for my family. Very strong. So, yeah, Keldon, folk magic for the win. Yeah. So does anybody have any questions for us? Oh, I see a shout out for Treaty 7. Oh, it's Hergest. Hi, Hergest.
We're getting some questions in the questions and answers section of this lovely software Crowdcast. So I'm going to read them. I'm going to read the question to you, Dodie. This one's from Terrence. Hi, Terrence. Dodie, how did you choose? You guys can, before I ask this question, you guys can throw your questions out in the regular group chat over here. You don't need to use the question and answer section, although I'll try to monitor that as well. Okay, go back to Terrence's question. Dodie, how did you choose the people to feature in your book? Give me a second to unmute you. Go ahead.
Okay. how did I choose them? It was hard, Terrence. It was really hard because I know a lot of super smarty pants people. Um, when I wrote about activism, it reminded me of Sparrow of the Wiggly and Way podcast, because Sparrow became very passionate about a cause that was going on. There was a pipeline going through pretty much her backyard out on the West Coast. And her story is in the book. And it was a natural. It was a moment when the earth really spoke to her. And it was a moment when she became very acutely aware that she needed to become an activist because of this experience she had. So that was really natural. I'd written about that story for The Wild Hunt, and I'm a fan of her podcast, so that was fairly easy one to figure out. I would, when I was writing about burying stuff in the earth and using actual dirt and earth as a medium for doing magic, that made me think of somebody who I'm a huge fan of, and that's Jackie Wood. She's a experimental archaeologist who lives in a very small little place in Cornwall in the UK. I had the privilege of visiting her archaeological site, and I saw what she was doing there, and it was very relevant to what I was writing. So I included an essay from her. And then some of the other folks, Dr. Karen Froman is a professor here at the University of Winnipeg. She teaches Native Studies. She's a Mohawk teacher and incredibly articulate and wonderful. And I wanted to include Indigenous voices in the chapter about the land. And I've known Karen since we were punk rock kids causing trouble. I love her voice, and I love the way she thinks. And it was a very cool fit for the book. She's a former Wiccan who reclaimed her Indigenous spiritual practices. So that was an amazing perspective to be able to bring in. Austin Lawrence runs a pagan campground and has created all kinds of shrines and temples around the campground that people can use. So, him talking about those kinds of things was really relevant. And Eric Lasherity, he is a practitioner that works with bear spirit energies, part of a bear cult. So talking about sacred animals that are related to the earth element, it was, how could I not include him, So I was pretty lucky. Any other... I can't see the...
Yeah, I'm getting the questions there. You guys can again throw out questions in the regular chat rather than ask a question or the question and answer section. That way it's easier for us to see them. But we've got another one from Ash for you. How did you balance tradition with new approaches to magic in your writing? Do you understand that? How do you balance tradition with new approaches to magic in your writing? I'm going to unmute you now.
Wow, that's an interesting question. I mean, when you're practicing magic, when you're actually doing it, when you're sitting there in your sacred space, I for one, I don't sit there analyzing that. So when I'm practicing, I am maybe I'm working within, say, a Wiccan template, but I'm also having an ecstatic experience and being pretty, hands-on and gritty with it when I'm doing it. And I hope that translated into my writing. It's trying not to categorize everything too heavily, but giving tribute to each and credit where credit's due. I hope that answers your question.
The next question, if you have follow-up questions, you can just again put them in the chat. The next question is for me, and I'm going to answer this. This is from Heron Michelle. Hi, Heron. the question is, what's your take on the evolution of witchcraft depictions between the original and new Charmed TV shows? So I have not seen all episodes of both. Yes, I have not seen every episode of the old Charmed even. However, the big point, the big takeaway with the two is what I was talking about earlier, is that in the Charmed of the 1990s was done at a point in time. Okay, it was part of what is often labeled by academics as a girl power movement. It was a period of time when Wicca was being promoted, so to speak. And I hate to use that word, but let's just use it for now. It was being used to, within this girl power movement, to tell girls they could do anything. And you have a lot of this going on at that period of time. You have Sabrina the Teenage Witch, you have Charmed, you have Buffy the Vampire Slayer. You have this, it's also called, the girl power movement was also called post-feminism. I can't remember the exact term of post-feminism. I think it was a sort of a reaction to the feminism, the second wave feminism. Okay, it was this notion that we had already arrived and now girls could do anything. And so Wicca was being rolled into that. Okay, but if you look at all the witches of that period of time, you're going to see a certain demographic. You know, it's middle class, upper middle class, pretty affluent white girls. Okay, so there's a definite representation of witches in this period of time. Fast forward to now, we're getting a lot of reboots of those films, including, or shows and films, including Charmed. And Charmed now is being cast, and I believe the sisters are all Latina, and they're being redefined with a diversity level that was not seen in the 1990s. And that is the biggest takeaway that needs to be addressed. Not only that, I believe one of the girls, one of the sisters is queer. Again, not something that was done for the most part in the 1990s, although Willow was the first lesbian witch on a television show geared towards a certain age group, and I believe they had the first kiss as well in that show. So there was a little bit of it going on in the 1990s, but really right now, the difference between the two, the takeaway is that diversity that I mentioned earlier. You're seeing a much more diverse representation of witches and what we look like, how they practice, what they practice now than you ever did before. So that is, if you have another question about that, that's the big takeaway with the two Charmed. And I'm going to answer a second question that's from Keldon. Hi, Keldon. It's good to have you here. Nice to see you. So the question for me is, what is your least favorite witch movie or show? I just answered this recently on a podcast. So I watched a lot of witchcraft movies, okay? And there are some that are so hideous I will not mention. There are some movies I watched where I halfway through I said, I don't know what I'm watching. I am turning this off, and I won't mention them. So in terms of famous witchcraft films, in terms of famous witch films that people really, really love, which is my least favorite, that's what I answer. And I always say Hocus Pocus. Now, I know probably all of you are gasping. Oh my goodness, how could I not like Hocus Pocus? From a perspective of studying these films, it's great. I mean, it's very interesting. I've watched it a number of times. I have no problem with a lot of it. I can, as a film scholar and student, I can watch almost any movie and enjoy parts of it. But overall, just for the enjoyment part, if I'm going to turn on a witch movie, I'm not turning on Hocus Pocus. It's just something about it. It's just not my taste. That's pretty much it. But it has its place, and I have no problem with people enjoying it. That said, so we have another any other questions? Let's see. I got another one on. Wait a minute. I got a comment here. This is not a question. This one's for Dodie. Someone named Jeff says hi there.
Cornball. Oh, I've lost your audio, Heather. I can't hear you.
Oh. Sorry, I demuted. I just have to read everything that's on the screen. So next question is coming from Cleo. Hi, Cleo. how do you think moving forward that the definition witch film will change with the evolution of streaming, podcasts, future technology? Will we stay in the 2021, 2020 range, or will we go backwards to an earlier understanding? Okay, so that's a really interesting question, and I'm going to get out my tarot cards to answer this one, I think, because we're looking forward. Basically, I believe we're going to have a cycle where witch films are going to become less popular. I do not think we'll go back to the demographic that we saw earlier. It builds on itself, and you can see that through my book on the films. Culture always builds on its own meanings. So meanings don't just disappear. They might get buried, but they build like a wall. So I don't believe we're going to go back to a point where all witches are defined with green skin, or all witches are defined as satanic, or all witches are defined as affluent white girls that are 16 years old. No, I don't think so. I think cultural meaning builds on itself. So I think it will continue. And what will the witch look like in 10 years? That is a great question. And I am here with my popcorn to see how that plays out, because I think it'll be very, very interesting. I mean, who could have predicted we would be here 50 years ago? So that's a great question. I just don't have a clear answer, because my crystal ball is ran out of power. So I have to wait till I can plug it back in, so to speak. So do we have, I have another film question here. Are witch films a good starting point for folks interested in magic as a tool to instill spiritual liberation? If so, and which films and shows would you recommend? I want us both to answer this, because really Dodie is a filmmaker, and she's done a documentary called Winnipegans about probably one of the only films that actually shows what we actually really do. So I'm just gonna let Dodie answer that question in terms of as a documentary filmmaker here, and as a film as a witch. So hold on one second.
Can you repeat? I actually need to hear that question again. When I heard it was for film, okay, first of all, I've never seen Hocus Pocus, so I can't speak to that. I avoided witch media like the plague up until about probably 5 years ago, when I got sort of indoctrinated by a friend who got me watching all this stuff. And once I started to go back and watch a lot of that, and I got caught up on like 20 years of pop culture that I boycotted, I was really shocked to find actually how much I'd missed, and how good some of it was, and how empowering some of it was. But I'm not sure if I'm the right person to even answer this question. I think that there's a whole bunch of space that needs to be made for more documentary, like actual documentary film to be made about real witchcraft and about real magics. And there's a gap there. And I occasionally get somebody popping up asking me about a thing for a film that they're doing, and they are never witches, and just like it's amazing that Heather wrote a book about witches in film. We need more pagan folk to make more pagan oriented films, because then that's when the authenticity is going to show through. I think the best one I can think of off the top of my head, and it's sort of in a class by itself, is the A Very British Witchcraft, the Wicca Gerald Gardner documentary hosted by Ronald Hutton. It's great. And there's a longer version and a shorter version. If you can find the longer version floating around on YouTube or something, it's really, both long or short, it's really worth watching. But the longer version has a little bit of extra content. And I appreciate that. You've got like a really reputable, really well, studied person walking you through this history. And it's a great document.
Thank you, Dodie. Yeah, the documentaries, I think if we can have more that are, like you said, like Winnipegans, done by witches, or authentic, those would be great places for good starting points for people who want to see what the practice is actually like, because there is no fiction film that's going to be perfect. Are the fiction films and shows good starting points? In my personal opinion, if something inspires you, whether it's pop culture related, whether it's a song on the radio, or whether it's a movie you've seen, if it inspires you spiritually to search yourself and to pursue a spiritual journey, then it can't be bad. I don't believe that's the case. So, you know, a lot of young people in the 90s, the craft led them to it. And if you do it for an hour a day, you copy what's on the screen, and then it leads you down a path that gives you some kind of spiritual liberation, or gives you turns you into something that brings out your authentic self and your creative self and all these things, gives you a community, then that's not bad at all. The only time it gets bad is when people start to believe that the way they do it on the screen is actually the way you're supposed to do it and the way people do it. Whether those lead people, it could lead people to a superficial practice. So if it's a starting point, great. I don't have a problem with that. So what film would be a good one to recommend? I have to think about that. Dodie, you have an answer. Is there a fiction film or show that you would recommend to new witches who might that might inspire them? I have to think about that. That's a good question.
Well, I mean, you know, I'm going to say The Wicker Man, right? The original one, because this is a party. I'm going to tell a funny little anecdote. I got Heather so mad at me at the Mystic South conference a couple years ago because I told her The Wicker Man was my favorite musical, and she flipped her wig. Okay, it was, but yeah, fiction film, that would be a good. I mean, I agree. There's little bits and pieces in so many films that can be really inspiring. You know, just don't believe everything you see on TV.
We have one. I see there's one over here. There was one in the. I'm scanning back here. Do you feel the term Wicca, and this is for you, Dodie, do you feel the term Wicca is becoming a pigeonholed into a specific type system instead of remaining a more eclectic nature?
Well, Wicca started out as a specific system, and it became eclectic when you know, in the 80s. And I think that now it's leading parallel lives. You know, there's initiatory traditional type Wicca, and then there's eclectic Wicca, and both are valid and both are strong. You know, I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a both. There's room for both.
I'm gonna go back to the film and show recommendations. We're getting close to, I think, the end of our hour-long party. So, but I want to address something that I bring out in my book. My book has a lot of layers and a lot of stories that are woven together. And one of the stories is the subversive readings of a lot of the older films. Now, a lot of the older films are very much negative towards the practice of witchcraft, or it's treated as silly, or whatever the case may be. But women often found power in these films. Okay, women could look at a film like Bell Book and Candle, where the woman has to give up her power in order to have love, but still love that witch. People love that witch. And the same goes for more evil witches. We're talking about the Wicked Queen in Disney. She's evil. She wants to kill a 16-year-old girl. I mean, she's a murderess, or you know, wants to be a murderess, right? But people are attracted to her. Women found power, particularly women. Again, I'm using that for a reason. You have to read my book to understand the full scope of it. But people find power in these characters, in these witch characters, because witches on screen, whether they are evil, like the Wicked Witch of the West, or whether they are positive, like Sabrina, the teenage witch, they're empowered, and they're allowed to have that power. And when you are an oppressed population, when you're marginalized, when you're a teenager that lives under your parents' roof, when you're a woman who's stuck in the home, whatever the case may be, you find inspiration and liberation watching these films, watching these characters wield their own sexuality, own their power. I mean, the Wicked Witch of the West, her power comes from her body, okay? Whereas Glinda's power comes from her wand, something that's been given to her. But the Wicked Witch's power, her magical power, comes from actually her body. And you see that in the Great and Powerful Oz that's made much later, same concept. So you wind up finding these subversive readings within these films, within these characters, even Samantha or Morticia. These are characters we love, whether they're evil or not. And that's a type of finding spiritual liberation. That's a way to find spiritual liberation on its own. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's my lecture and I'm sticking to it. So I think we're near the end of our hour. I don't know if we have any more questions. I'm looking here real quick. I don't see anything else. So I don't know, Dodie, you want to have a couple final words before we do the drawing?
I'm really excited that we have these great prizes to give away. I just want to, maybe show them off a little bit. And everybody who's here is eligible to win either the grand prize or we've got 2 secondary prizes as well. And what I'm contributing to these things is a copy of this book, little thing we like to call the Earth Magic right here. It's packed with all kinds of earthy goodness. And because we've been talking about movies a lot, I thought somebody might like to have a DVD copy. Does anybody have these things? It's like an antique now. It's called a DVD. Anyway, this is called The Winnipegans. It's got a little funny little man named Pan on the front because, everybody needs that. Heather, that's how Heather and I met. She actually interviewed me for The Wild Hunt about this. And there's a quote from Heather on the front because she said smart stuff and I liked it. So I put it right on the cover of the DVD. And then a really great local Winnipeg business is Ritual Wild. And Ritual Wild is a lovely woman named Jessica. And she has this company that makes all these fantastic scents and perfumes and all natural body products. And she was inspired to create, can you see that? I'm so pleased. An Earth Magic Essential Ritual Oil Blend. So there'll be a little bottle of that in there as well. So, and Heather's got some really cool stuff too. Heather, strut that swag, Heather. Let's see it.
Okay, you know what? I really think dirt fell out of your book when you opened it up. I think that's how earthy it really is. Okay, so you get a copy of the book, Lights, Camera, Witchcraft, and then I have for the individual drawing, I have a nice tumbler, stainless tumbler with Drink Up Witches. And this is Sybil. This is my character, Sybil. Oops, what happened there? That's it. Drink Up Witches. And then the grand prize, which is going to be a combination of what Dodie's offering, as well as my book, combination of the two. And this neat little thing, this was hand done by Ben, and he's a designer and artist, and he makes these little phone holders. And this one says, Born to Ride with a Little Witch, because I had to have it movie themed. And so what you do with it is, here's my phone. It's a phone holder. So you can put this on your desk, and instead of looking down at your phone and getting the text next thing, you just have this nice little stand for your phone. And so that is from Bewitched Homes, which is a new line of home products that he has launched from his design company. So that is the 2 prizes coming from here. So I guess are we ready? Do you want to make some final words first before we draw? Are we ready to draw?
Because we've got a grand prize and 2 secondary prizes, right? So let's go for it.
Okay, so here we go. Get ready. The first one is going to be Earth Magic, going to someone named Stephen I don't know if I'm going to pronounce your last name right. Hergist or Hergist? Are you here? I unmuted.
Congratulations, Hergis. That's the Earth Magic prize pack. That's great. We're connected back channel, I think. Hergis, could you please send me your contact information by private message? I can see. Thank you. Okay. Heather, you muted.
Sorry, we had this little tech thing. Okay, I'm not muted now. So now we're going to the film one. Rose Preto, are you there? Did I say the name right? Okay. Oh, there. Okay, there's Rose. Hi, and you win the book and the tumbler. Drink Up Witches. And just if you could do me a favor, I just need your just send me your email and we can hook up and arrange for the shipping on that. Okay? Yay! Congratulations. And the next one, the third one, is going to be the grand prize of both books and the phone and the other the oils. So, and the movie Winnipegans. So let's do the next drawing. And it goes to Jen Cornish. Is Jen here? Jen's here. There she is. Congratulations. Dodie,
Am I on? Can you hear me? Yeah. Jen and I are connected via Facebook. Send me your coordinates, hon. And Rose, yeah. Okay, yeah, awesome. So many familiar faces in the crowd tonight. Thank you all so much for being a part of this incredibly big day for Heather and I. Thank you.
Yes. This was amazing. So many great people out there. I recognize so many names, and it's great. Thank you for listening to us and being here to celebrate this amazing day. Our books are now born and out there, and we hope that everybody who reads them puts comments on Amazon, shares with their friends, and gets out and does a little earth magic, connects with the land, and then comes inside after you're done and watches a good witch movie. How's that? Does that sound like a plan?
Oh, there's a question there about the DVDs. Yes, they are available for purchase. You can find them through my website, DodieGrahamMcKay.com.
You want to also share where everyone can find you and the book and anything else, and maybe where they can find the little oil that you have, the Earth Magic oil, if they want that. Just all that good stuff.
And Winnipegans DVDs, you can order them through my website, DodieGrahamMcKay.com. Maybe somebody's better. Maybe I'll just type that into the thing when I'm not busy talking. If you're looking to buy a copy of Earth Magic, please hit up your local bookstore, independent bookstore. If you don't have a local independent bookstore near you, you can order them from big online giants like Amazon anywhere in the world. I saw Julie was commenting. Julie in the UK, you're up late, dear, or early. Not really sure how that works. And if you're in the UK, Amazon.co.uk will have it, or hit up your local witch shop. If you live in Winnipeg, I will be at Prairie Sky Books on October 30th to sign books. They have some fabulous prizes available for people who pre-order through that store. So that's Prairie Sky Books on October 30th. And then on November the 16th, which is a Tuesday night, I will be at McNally Robinson Booksellers to do a reading and a presentation and to sign books. So there's a couple opportunities to hang out if you're a local Winnipeg person. Yeah, I guess that's it. Oh, gee, how did I not say this already? Ritualwild.com, www.ritualwild.com. Absolutely fascinating, beautiful, pure, clean product. And like, come on, an Earth Magic Essential Ritual Oil. Crazy, I'm so pumped. It smells so good. Heather, where can we get your book? And he said Ben makes. How do we get those?
Okay, so like Dodie said, you can get my book in local bookstores. Those are always great. And if not, the big ones, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, directly from Llewellyn.com too. You can buy directly from them on their website, Llewellyn.com. I have my own website. It's heathergreene.net. I have appearances there, so you'll see where I will be speaking. I have a number of online events. Treadwell's is doing one in November. Treadwell's is in the UK, and they're doing online classes. And so I'll be speaking there. But tomorrow, for my Atlanta folk, I will be at Phoenix and Dragon. And then I will be back at Phoenix and Dragon, I believe, 2 weeks later on a Saturday. Tomorrow, I'm talking about the top 10 witches in film and television. And then I'll be talking about the witchcraft, modern witchcraft in film in 2 weeks. I've got another online event on the 14th. I'm talking about TV witches, part of Spooky Evening. So you can go to my website, again, heathergreene.net, and you can find all of that there, and other great things about my work, my journalism, my articles that get published. Where can you get the good stuff, the fun stuff, the Born to Ride little things? This is at thebewitchedhome.com, which is a new site. I'm going to put it in the thing there. The Bewitched Home is a series of home products specifically designed with a witchy theme for witches. Of course, if you're not a witch and you want one of them, that's fine too. Nothing will happen to you. But we have some really great stuff. Most of it is handmade by our master craftsmen, and we just had so much fun making the cutting boards, which we did a couple years ago, and they were so successful that we decided to do a few other things. So check that out when you get a chance. And what I say is go watch movies, guys. Just my book has in it lists of movies at the end of each chapter. Go watch the movies. That's the fun part. And other than that, thank you for being here. And yes, happy Halloween, happy Samhain, blessed Samhain, happy fall, and happy gourd season, happy shellacked decorative gourd season, of course. There we go. That's a good one. I like that one. I'm putting you back on so you can say your goodbyes.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for being a part of our special day. I wish you all the best decorative gourds of the season and a blessed Samhain. And, I hope you, if you pick up our books and you read them, I hope you enjoy them. Good night.